let's clear something up about photography that people don't understand. You know, there's a buddy of mine, he took like a Briggs & Stratton motor. It was on some sort of fancy grass mowing implement, and he took it off and he made an ultralight out of it. You know what an ultralight is? It's like that thing from James Bond movie. It's got 3 little wheels, got a big propeller in the back and a parachute overhead. So that same motor that was used to chop grass and like twigs was used to propel a propeller, so that you could fly up in the air. Every once in a while I'll see him out at Jacobson Park with that big parachute and he's flying people around. He charges $50 a head to fly them around in the ultralight. Pretty dangerous, by the way. And I got used to skydive. People that say stupid stuff about Sony sensors. I don't know, like, if you know what the hell's going on. But the guy that's been taking cameras apart for over 20 years, here's a Nikon D500, by the way, or what's left of one, will tell you that, let me repeat these words a few times. A sensor is not a camera. A sensor is not a camera. Okay. If that were the case, then the Nikon D610 and the Nikon D750, however, they are both plagued with issues, but that's not related to the sensor. Nikon D610 and Nikon D750 would be the same camera. They both use the exact same damn sensor. Yeah, no. See, D750 is a lot better performer, has a little better dynamic range, also performs better in low light, but they both use the same sensor. Nikon D3, Nikon D700 both use the exact same 12 megapixel sensor, but the D700 straight out of camera looks worlds better than the Nikon D3. A camera is not a sensor. There's a neat little thing in the back side of your camera. It's called a mainboard, and on that is the buffer. And we also have different shutter max. Yeah, we could have a mirrorless versus a regular DSLR camera. We also have the most important thing that you don't ever see and doesn't show up on a specification sheet is the 80 converters and the SNR firmware applied to the signal input, other image processing filters before they're buffered and finally dropped onto a card. A camera is not a sensor. Everybody keeps saying, well, there's a Sony sensor in that camera. Yeah, you know, there's a Sony sensor in the Fujifilm X-T2, but the difference is that X-T2, pay close attention, is a camera that everybody wants, is supported with a wide variety of lenses by a company that has impeccable service, constantly giving firmware updates, and it is in a form factor that is, I personally have listed from my own premise as the best all-around camera ever made. The Fujifilm X-T2. I never said it was the best at sports or action. I never said it was the best at portraiture or wildlife. I said it's the best all-around camera. That's a Sony sensor. Of course, that's an X-trans sensor, okay, which is just an array that sits over top of the sensor for filtering out RGB. Still a Sony sensor. Sony sensor here, Sony Incorporated here, in case they get into hardcore financial trouble, which they've had issues with in the past, where they nearly declared bankruptcy, is trying to spin off their sensor division as a separate entity. So when and if Sony hits the bricks, that they won't drag their sensor division down with them. It's unfortunate that they've actually gobbled up Renaissance sensor manufacturing, but that's been the case of other companies like Western Digital gobbled up Hitachi, Western Digital gobbled up SanDisk, and now that Lexar is out of business, Western Digital is probably going to buy their XQD card manufacturing facilities and or equipment. No big deal. No issues with Sony sensors, but I have issue with people that stupidly believe that a camera is a sensor. That's not the case. Well, that would be synonymous to the engine of a car. You're only partially correct, but if it were the engine, it would only be the crankshaft and the headers maybe, because the rest of the engine are the 80 converters and the SNR firmware, signal processing and buffering, and that is not part of the sensor. ISO performance is also not part of the sensor. Now here's something else that you think is part of the sensor, but which is not part of the sensor. Let's take the Fujifilm GFX. Same sensor is in the Pentax Z. Same sensor is in the Mamiya Leaf. Why does the GFX have better dynamic range and better low light performance? However, low light performance is not that wonderful. Why does it have better performance? Micro lens design. Fujifilm specifically ordered, and that's the overlay, that would be like the lenses. If my eyeballs are a sensor, okay, it's like, well, this is a sensor. It's like, yeah, okay, you want to work with that? That's fine. Fujifilm specifically ordered a specific set of lenses which actually focus the light onto the array of that particular sensor manufactured by Sony, which makes it, while the same sensor, a different sensor SNR, signal to noise ratio, because that is actually the true exposure triangle of digital photography. ISO has nothing to do with exposure. ISO is applied gain. That actually shocks people too. What do you mean ISO? ISO is exposure triangle. It is in film photography. ISO has no connection to exposure in digital photography. SNR does, signal to noise ratio. Okay, that involves a few different factors, but we actually have gain and time, which are aperture and shutter speed. The other one is SNR. So Fujifilm designed a specific micro lens array, or glasses if you will, to sit over top of the photosite eyeballs of that particular Sony sensor. A camera is not a sensor. I have no issues with Sony sensors being in Fujifilm cameras or in Nikon cameras. Nikon still has 3 separate sources, 2 additional sources now other than Sony for their sensors, not just Sony. However, Sony's wanted to gobble it up and dominate that particular market. The next 2 breeds of sensors that are going to come out are RGBW sensors, and the next one are going to be curved sensors. The reason for the curved sensor, by the way, is the same reason for the eyeball. The eyeball only has 1 lens in it, but the eyeball is spherical. You know how you can get really incredible efficiency out of the eyeball, which is far superior to any lens and sensor out there? Yeah, here's the back of your eyeball, and here's the lens. 1 lens, and the sensor in the back of your eye is curved. So you want to know I had a lot of people ask me, what are the advantages of a curved sensor? And it's like, well, do you know how your eyeball works? It's like, yeah, where's the image projected on the back of your eyeball? Oh, it's projected on the back of your eye. It's like, what shape is the back of your eye? Yeah, shaped like a bowl. Curved sensor. Nature is mimicked for superior design, once again, of course. Finally, Sony and Nikon and other people have taken note of Victor Schauberger's ideas of mimicking nature to create devices that work in a superior fashion. So, you're making a large mistake in thinking that a camera is just a lens and a sensor, because same sensors in different cameras behave radically different. And they behave radically different due to micro lens design. They behave radically different due to 80 converters, the bit depth of those converters, the signal processing. The SNR firmware is incredibly important. That processes the image without doing like a noise reduction. It's basically in-camera noise reduction. So, stop thinking a camera is a sensor, because it's not. Because I could take the exact same sensor that's in the Fuji X-T2, and let's assume it's an X-Trans sensor, and then like tell Sony Incorporated to build a camera around that 24 megapixel X-Trans sensor, and Sony would come up with some piece of junk that would be A, obsoleted in 9 months, B, have no service, 3, have no parts, 4, have no lenses. You follow me? Yeah, it'd be a sensor surrounded by a crappy camera that would be obsoleted in 9 months with no lenses, poor customer support, and yeah, camera is not a sensor. Go figure. Bye.